An estate memorandum, duties and perquisites. The Thane's law. The law of the Thane is that he be entitled to his chartered estates, and that he perform three things in respect of his land: military service, and the repair of fortresses, and work on bridges. Also in many estates further land duties rise by order of the king, such as servicing the deer fence at the king's residence, and equipping a guardship and guarding the coast, and attendance on his superior, and supplying a military guard, almsgiving, and church dues, and many other different things. The Jinneat's duty. The Jinneat's duty varies, depending on what is determined for the estate. In some he must pay ground rent, and store one store pig a year, and ride, and perform his carrying services, and supply cartage, work and entertain his lord, reap and mow, cut deer fences and maintain hides, build and fence fortifications, conduct strangers to the manor, pay church dues and alms, attend his superior, and guard the horses, carry messages far and near, wherever he is directed. The cottager's duty. The cottager's duty depends on what is determined for the estate. In some he must work for his lord each Monday throughout the year, or 3 days each week at harvest time. He need not pay ground rent. He ought to have 5 acres, more if it be custom on the estate, and if it ever be less, it will be too little, because his labor must always be available. He is to pay his hearth-penny on Ascension Day, just as every freeman ought, and serve on his lord's estate, if he is ordered, by guarding the coast, and work at the king's deer fence, and at similar things according to what his rank is, and he is to pay his church dues at Martinmas. The Jeeber's duties. The Jeeber's duties vary. In some places they are heavy, in others moderate. On some estates it is such that he must perform such work as he is directed for 2 weekdays each week for every week throughout the year, and 3 weekdays at a harvest time, and 3 from Candlemas to Easter. If he performs cartage, he need not work while the horse is out. At Michaelmas he must pay 10 pence tax, and at Martinmas 23 cesters of barley and 2 hens. At Easter 1 young sheep or 2 pence, and from Martinmas until Easter he must lie at his lord's fold as often as it is his turn. And from the time when they first plough until Martinmas he must plough 1 acre each week, and prepare the seed in the Lord's barn himself. Also 2 acres for the asking, and 2 for pasture. If he need more grass, then he is to earn it as he is allowed. He is to plough his 3 acres as tribute land, and sow it from his own barn, and he is to pay his hearth-penny. And every 2 are to support 1 deerhound, and each tenant is to give 6 loaves to the swineherd when he drives his herd to the mass pasture. On the same estate where these arrangements exist, they ought to give the tenant, for the occupation of the land, 2 oxen and 1 cow and 6 sheep and 7 sown acres on his piece of land. He is to perform all the duties which appertain to him throughout the year, and they are to give him tools for his work and utensils for his house. When death befalls him, his lord is to take charge of what he leaves. This estate law exists on certain estates, and at some places, as I have said, it is heavier, at some places also lighter, for all estate customs are not alike. On some estates, a tenant must pay tax in honey, on some tax in food, on some tax in ale. He who looks after the administration is to take care that he always knows what is the ancient arrangement on the estate, and what the custom of the people. Concerning him who looks after the bees. If he maintain a swarm subject to tax, the beekeeper ought to pay what is arranged on the estate. With us it is arranged that he pay 5 cesters of honey as tax. On some estates a greater tax arrangement pertains. Also, at certain times, he must be ready for many kinds of work at his lord's pleasure, besides ploughing on request and reaping on request and mowing meadows. And if he is well provided with land, he must be supplied with a horse so that he may furnish the lord with a beast of burden, or go out himself, whichever he is directed. And a man of such condition must do many things. I cannot recount them all now. When death befall him, the lord is to take charge of what he leaves, except for what should be free. The taxable swineherd. The taxable swineherd ought to pay for his butchering, according to what is determined on the estate. On many estates it is the custom that he supply 15 pigs for killing every year, 10 old and 5 young. He is to have for himself whatever he rears beyond that. On many estates a greater swineherd's due pertains. Each swineherd is to take care that after the slaughter of his swine he prepare and singe them properly. Then he will be fully entitled to the perquisites. He must also, as I said before about the beekeeper, always be ready for every sort of work, and provided with a horse at the Lord's need. After death, a slave swineherd and a slave beekeeper are subject to one law, concerning the swineherd who goes with the property. The swineherd belonging to the property who keeps the estate herd ought to have a young pig to keep in a sty, and his perquisites when he has prepared the bacon, and other rights which pertain to a slave. Concerning men's provisions, one servant ought to have as provisions 12 pounds of good corn, and the carcasses of 2 sheep, and 1 good cow for eating, and the right of cutting wood according to the custom of the estate. Concerning women's provisions, for a female slave, 8 pounds of corn for food, 1 sheep or 3 pence for winter supplies, 1 cester of beans for Lenten supplies, whey in summer, or 1 penny. All serfs ought to have Christmas supplies and Easter supplies, an acre for the plow, and a handful of the harvest, in addition to their necessary rights. Concerning retainers, a retainer ought to have what he might earn in 12 months from 2 acres, one sown and the other unsown. He is to sow the one himself, and he ought to have his food and shoes and gloves. If he can earn more, he is to keep the profit himself. Concerning the sower, when he has properly sown every seed throughout the space of a year, a sower ought to have 1 basketful of every kind of seed. Concerning the ox herd, with his elderman's knowledge, the ox herd may pasture 2 or more oxen with the Lord's herd on the common pasture, with that to earn shoes and gloves for himself, and his food cow may go with the Lord's oxen. Concerning the cowherd, a cowherd ought to have an old cow's milk for 7 days after she is newly calved, and the beestings of a young cow for a fortnight, and his food cow is to go with the Lord's cows. Concerning the shepherd's right is that he have 12 nights dung at Christmas, and 1 lamb from the year's young, and 1 bellwether's fleece, and the milk of his flock for 7 days after the equinox, and a bowlful of whey or buttermilk all summer. Concerning the goatherd, a goatherd ought to have the milk of his herd after Martinmas, and before that his share of whey and a 1-year-old kid, if he takes good care of his herd. Concerning the cheesemaker, to the cheesemaker pertain 100 cheeses, and that she make butter for the Lord's table from the wrung-out whey, and let her have all the buttermilk except for the herdsman's share. Concerning the granary keeper ought to have the corn split at the barn door at harvest time, if his ealdormen allow him it, and he deserve it with faithfulness. Concerning the beadle, because of his office, the beadle ought to be more free from work than other men, since he must always be ready. Also, he ought to have some small piece of land for his labor. Concerning the forester ought to have every tree brought down by the wind. It is appropriate that they reward the hayward's labor from those parts which lie near the pasture, because if he has previously neglected it, he can expect to be blamed for damage to sown fields. And if he is granted such a piece of land, by common law it must be nearest the pasture, because if out of laziness he neglects his lord, his own will not be well protected if it be provided thus. Then, if he properly guards all he must look after, he will be fully entitled to a good reward. As I said before, estate laws are various, nor do we apply these regulations, which we have previously spoken about, in all districts. But we tell what the custom is where it is known to us. If we learn better, we will readily delight in and maintain it according to the custom of the people among whom we then live. Wherefore, one must learn the laws in the district lovingly, if one does not wish to lose good opinion on the estate. There are many common rights. In some districts there are due winter supplies, Easter supplies, a harvest feast for reaping, a drinking feast for plowing, a reward for mowing, a meal at the haystack, a log from the wagon at wood carrying, a rick cup at corn carrying, and many things which I cannot recount. However, this is a memorandum of men's provisions, and all that I have previously related.